Welcome to Nick's Scary Stories, the place where real nightmares come alive. Tonight, we're traveling to a remote town in Northern California to uncover a house that wasn't just haunted, it lived. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe before we begin, because by the end of this tale, you might never trust the silence in your own home again. Story 1. The Woman in the Attic. I never believed in ghosts until I saw her staring at me from the attic. My name's Maria, and in 2018, my family moved into a craftsman-style house on Tulare Street in Fresno, California. It was me, my husband Carlos, a nurse who worked late shifts at the hospital, and our teenage daughter Sophia, who was either at soccer practice or sketching in her room. The house was a fixer-upper with peeling paint, creaky oak floors, and a musty smell that clung to everything. We loved its charm, the high ceilings, the stained glass window in the hall, but something about it felt wrong. I was home alone most days painting walls trying to make it ours when I first heard it, a soft tapping like fingernails on wood coming from the attic. At first, I blamed squirrels. Old houses have critters, don't they? But the tapping came every afternoon, always at 3 p.m. sharp like a ritual. Tap, tap, tap. I'd stand at the bottom of the attic ladder, heart thumping, staring at the trapdoor, too scared to move. One day I grabbed a flashlight, my hands trembling, and climbed up. The air was thick with dust, and the tapping stopped the moment I pushed the trapdoor open. Just boxes, cobwebs, and an old, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Nothing else. I laughed, told myself I was paranoid, but as I turned to leave, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. It wasn't a draft. It was sharp, deliberate, like someone exhaling right behind me. I ran downstairs, slamming the trapdoor shut, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. That night, Sophia woke me up, whispering, "Mom, did you hear someone walking upstairs?" I froze. Carlos was at work, his shift not ending until dawn. It was just us. I checked every room, nothing. But Sophia's eyes were wide, her voice trembling. "It sounded like boots," she said, clutching her blanket. I didn't sleep that night, lying awake, listening for sounds that never came again. The next day I was painting the kitchen, the smell of fresh paint filling the air, when the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. Louder this time, more insistent, like someone demanding attention. I climbed to the attic, flashlight shaking in my hand. The mirror was turned, facing me, though I swore it had been angled away before. In the reflection, I saw her, a woman with long, tangled hair, wearing a faded dress, standing behind me. Her eyes were empty like black holes, staring right into mine. I spun around, but no one was there. The mirror showed only me now, my face pale, my eyes wide with terror. I bolted downstairs, locked the attic door, and swore I'd never go back up. Carlos checked the attic when I told him, but he found nothing. "Maria, you're stressed," he said, kissing my forehead gently. "Maybe it's the paint fumes messing with you." But Sophia started having nightmares, saying a woman whispered her name in the dark, over and over. She stopped sketching, which wasn't like her. She'd always been so creative, always filling notebooks with drawings of flowers and faces. I tried to stay calm for her sake, but I was terrified, my nerves frayed. A week later, I found an old photo tucked inside a kitchen drawer. A picture of our house decades ago with a woman in a dress standing on the porch, her face blurred but eerily familiar. I showed it to our neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, who'd lived in Fresno forever. Her face went pale, her hands shaking as she held the photo. "That's Clara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "She lived here in the 50s. Locked herself in the attic one day, didn't come out. They found her too late, starved, they said, but her face, it was like she'd seen something awful, something that broke her." My stomach twisted into knots while rising in my throat. The tapping never stopped, a constant reminder of her presence, like a heartbeat in the walls. It started coming at night too, waking me from shallow sleep. One evening, Sophia was at a friend's house and Carlos was working late again. I was alone, reading in the living room when I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate boots, pacing in the attic. Tap, 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 then a low, mournful hum like a lullaby gone wrong. I gripped my book, my knuckles white, telling myself to stay put. But then I heard Sophia's voice, soft and distant, coming from the attic. "Mom, she wants to stay," it said. My blood ran cold. Sophia wasn't home. I raced upstairs, my legs shaking, and flung open the trapdoor. There was Sophia, standing in front of the mirror, eyes glassy, staring at her own reflection. But it wasn't her. The reflection's lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear, though Sophia stood still, silent, her face blank. I grabbed her, dragged her downstairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. She blinked, confused, saying she didn't remember climbing up there, didn't remember anything. The next day, I called a priest who blessed the house, but the tapping only grew louder, angrier, like Clara was mocking us. We moved out the next month, leaving everything behind. Furniture, clothes, even Sophia's sketchbooks. We couldn't take the risk of bringing Clara with us. The new owners don't talk about the attic, but I hear they keep it locked, the trapdoor nailed shut. Sometimes I drive by that house on Tulare Street, and I swear I see a shadow in the attic window watching me. I dream about Clara, her empty eyes, her tangled hair, and I wonder if she's still up there tapping, waiting for someone else to see her in that mirror, waiting to be let out. But what scares me most isn't Clara, it's the thought that. Story 2, the boy who wasn't mine. I thought I knew my son, until I saw him somewhere he couldn't be. My name's David, and in 2015 my wife Lisa and I rented an apartment on Shaw Avenue in Fresno, California. It was a cramped, old place with thin walls, creaky floors, and a faint smell of mildew, but it was close to my warehouse job and we needed something cheap. We lived there with our 5-year-old son Jacob, a happy kid who loved his stuffed dinosaur and bedtime stories about pirates and dragons. Lisa worked nights as a nurse, so I tucked Jacob in, read to him until his eyes fluttered shut, clutching his dinosaur, and then crash on the couch. But sometimes after he was asleep, I'd hear him talking, like he was answering someone in the dark. It started a month after we moved in. I'd put Jacob to bed, his dinosaur tucked under his arm, and head to the living room to unwind. Around midnight, I'd hear whispers from his room, soft like he was chatting with a friend. I'd check, heart thumping, but he'd be fast asleep, his little chest rising and falling under the blanket. I told Lisa, but she brushed it off. "He's dreaming, David," she said, exhausted from her shift. Still, it happened every few nights and I started noticing other things. Toys would be out of place. His dinosaur on the kitchen counter when I knew he'd left it in bed. Once, I found his shoes by the front door, covered in mud, though he hadn't been outside all day. I cleaned them, my hands shaking, telling myself it was nothing, but my gut churned with unease. One night, I was watching TV, half asleep, when I heard the front door creak open. I bolted up, heart racing, and saw Jacob standing in the doorway, staring into the dark parking lot. "Jacob, what are you doing?" I called, my voice sharp. He didn't answer, just stood there, his dinosaur dangling from his hand, his small frame outlined by the streetlight's glow. I ran over, grabbed him, and carried him back to bed. His eyes were open, glassy, like he was sleepwalking, his skin cold to the touch. I locked the door, checked the windows, and stayed up until Lisa got home, my mind racing. The next morning, Jacob didn't remember a thing. "I was sleeping, Daddy," he said, confused, his big eyes searching mine. But I couldn't shake the image of him standing there, staring at nothing, like he was waiting for someone, or something. It got worse. One evening, Lisa was at work and I was washing dishes when I saw Jacob in the courtyard through the kitchen window, standing under a streetlight, looking up at our apartment. I dropped a plate, the crash echoing, and ran outside calling his name, but he wasn't there. I checked his room, my heart pounding. He was asleep, curled up with his dinosaur, his blanket pulled tight. My hands shook as I locked every door, my mind screaming that I'd seen him outside. I didn't tell Lisa. She was already stressed and I didn't want her to think I was losing it. But Jacob started drawing pictures, stick figures of a boy and a man holding hands with the words, "He wants me to go," scrawled in crayon. I asked who he was, my voice trembling. Jacob just shrugged, but his eyes were scared, like he knew something he couldn't say. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I asked the landlord about the apartment's history. He hesitated, then told me a kid had died there in the 90s, hit by a car in the parking lot. His dad lived in our unit, drank himself to death after, consumed by grief. I felt sick, my stomach twisting. That night, I heard the whispers again, but this time it wasn't Jacob's voice. It was deeper, older, a man's voice saying, "Come outside, son." I checked Jacob's room, my heart in my throat. He was gone. I tore through the apartment, calling his name, and found him in the courtyard, standing under the streetlight, staring up at our window. "He says he's lonely," Jacob whispered, his voice not his own, his eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I grabbed him, threw our things in a bag, and we stayed in a motel that night. We never went back. The landlord said the apartment's been empty since we left. No one stays long. Sometimes I drive by Shaw Avenue and I swear I see a small figure under that streetlight, clutching a dinosaur, looking up. But what haunts me most isn't the figure, it's Jacob's drawings. The man in them had my face, but I never called him outside. I keep Jacob close now, but I can't stop wondering, who was calling him? And what if they're still out there, waiting in the dark, whispering for a boy who isn't theirs? Story 3, the locked room. I thought locking a door would keep it out, but some things don't need keys. My name's Sarah, and in 2020 my brother Mark and I moved into a duplex on Belmont Avenue in Fresno, California. We were both in our 20s, scraping by. Mark worked construction, always coming home dusty and tired, while I pulled shifts as a barista juggling college classes. The duplex was old, with faded wallpaper, creaky floors, and a faint smell of mildew, but the rent was cheap, and it had a spare room we used for storage. The landlord warned us not to bother with it. The lock was broken and it was full of junk from past tenants. We didn't care until we heard the singing. It started the first week, late at night. I was in bed, scrolling on my phone when I heard it, a soft, lilting voice like a lullaby coming from the spare room. Blah, blah, blah. It was faint, almost sweet, but it sent a chill down my spine. I thought it was the neighbor's TV, but it was too clear, too close, drifting through the walls. I knocked on Mark's door, my heart thudding. "You hear that?" I asked, my voice shaky. He nodded, his eyes wide, his usual tough guy act gone. We crept to the spare room, but the door was locked, and the singing stopped the moment we touched the handle. We laughed it off, blamed the old pipes, but I couldn't sleep that night. The lullaby stuck in my head like a bad dream. The next night, it happened again, louder, sadder, like someone mourning. Mark tried picking the lock with a screwdriver, but it wouldn't budge, like the door was fighting back. "Forget it," he said, frustrated. "It's just the house being weird." But it wasn't just the house. I started having dreams, vivid, suffocating ones, of a woman in a white dress, sitting in that room rocking an empty cradle, her face hidden by long dark hair. I'd wake up sweating, the lullaby still echoing in my ears. Mark admitted he heard it too, even during the day when I was at work. He said it felt like the voice was calling him, pulling him toward the door. One morning, I found him standing outside the spare room, staring at the knob, his hand hovering like he was about to turn it. "Mark, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp. He blinked like he'd been in a trance and muttered, "I thought I heard you in there." My blood ran cold. I was in the kitchen making coffee. We asked the landlord about the room. He got quiet, his face pale, then said, "A woman lived here in the 70s. Lost her baby, went crazy, locked herself in that room. Died there, starvation they think. Nobody's used it since." He wouldn't meet our eyes, hurrying away. That night, the singing was louder, a haunting melody that made my skin crawl, and I heard footsteps inside the locked room, slow, dragging steps like someone pacing. Mark grabbed a crowbar, his jaw tight, and we pried the door open. Inside was just junk, boxes, a broken chair, dusty curtains, but there, in the corner, was the cradle from my dreams, rocking slightly though no one touched it. The air felt heavy, thick with something watching us. We slammed the door shut, nailed it closed with every nail we could find, and slept on the couch, too scared to go near our rooms. The singing never stopped, seeping through the walls, day and night. One night, I woke up to find Mark gone. My heart pounded as I searched the duplex, calling his name. I found him in front of the spare room, the nails pulled out, the door ajar. He was humming the lullaby, his eyes blank, his hands trembling. "She needs me," he said, his voice flat, not his own. I grabbed his arm, dragged him out, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold on. We moved the next day, leaving everything behind, clothes, furniture, even Mark's tools. The new tenants didn't last a month. They said the singing started the first night, and the cradle was always rocking even when they chained it still. I still hear that lullaby in my dreams sometimes, soft and mournful, calling me back. But what scares me most isn't the singing. It's that Mark doesn't remember that night, doesn't remember humming. What if it wasn't just calling him? What if it was already inside him? Story 4. The House That Knew. I thought houses were just walls and floors, until mine started telling my secrets. My name's Javier, and in 2016, I moved into a bungalow on Olive Avenue in Fresno, California, with my wife Elena and our twin boys, Mateo and Lucas, both 8 years old. The house was small but cozy, with a big backyard where the boys played soccer until dusk. Elena was a teacher, always grading papers late into the night, while I ran a small auto shop, coming home smelling of oil and sweat. Life was busy, normal, the kind of routine you settle into, until the house started talking. Not with words, but with signs, little clues that made my skin crawl. It began with the mirrors. I'd walk by the bathroom mirror and see my reflection move wrong, like it lingered a second too long after I turned away. I'd catch glimpses of myself doing things I hadn't done, like smiling when I was exhausted, or holding a wrench I hadn't picked up. I told myself it was stress, long hours at the shop, but Elena noticed it too. "Javier, the mirror in the hall, it's creepy," she said one night, her voice low. She swore she saw herself grading papers in it, even when she was cooking dinner. The boys, though, seemed fine, chasing each other around, oblivious. But I started finding their toys, soccer balls, action figures, arranged in neat rows on the kitchen counter like someone was organizing them at night. One evening, I was fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen when I heard Elena's voice from the living room, sharp and angry. "Javier, why didn't you tell me?" I froze, wrench in hand. She was at a parent-teacher conference, not due home for hours. I crept to the living room, my heart pounding, but it was empty. The TV was off, the house silent except for a faint hum, like static from the walls. I checked on the boys. They were asleep, sprawled across their bunk beds. Back in the kitchen, I saw it in the window's reflection. Elena standing behind me, her face twisted with hurt. I spun around, but no one was there. My hands shook as I locked the back door, telling myself it was nothing, just my tired eyes playing tricks. The next day, I found a note on the fridge, written in Elena's handwriting. "Why did you lie?" I hadn't lied about anything, but when I showed it to her, she went pale. "I didn't write that," she whispered, her eyes darting to the boys who were eating cereal, unaware. Things got stranger. The mirrors started showing more. Mateo crying in his reflection, though he was laughing in the backyard. Lucas kicking a ball that wasn't there. I covered the mirrors with sheets, but the house found other ways. Photos on the mantle would turn face down overnight. Once I found a family picture with my face scratched out, the glass cracked. The boys started waking up screaming, saying they heard whispers telling them secrets. Secrets about me, about Elena, things kids shouldn't know, like arguments we'd had in private. I dug into the house's history. A neighbor, old Mr. Garcia, told me it had belonged to a woman in the 80s who'd lost her family in a fire. She went mad, he said, talked to the house like it was alive, said it knew everything. She died in the bungalow, alone, whispering to the walls. I felt sick, my stomach churning. That night, I heard Elena's voice again from the basement this time. "You can't hide it," it said, cold and accusing. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands trembling, and went down. The basement was empty, just boxes and cobwebs, but the air felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath. In the corner, I saw a mirror we'd never owned, propped against the wall. It showed me, not as I was, but older, my face lined with guilt, my hands stained with something dark. I smashed it, glass shattering, and ran upstairs. The whispers grew louder, telling secrets we'd buried, Elena's doubts about our marriage, my fears about the shop failing. One night, I woke to find the boys standing in the living room, staring at the covered mirror, their voices in unison. "It knows, Daddy." I grabbed them, packed our bags, and we left at dawn. We stayed with Elena's sister, never going back. The house is for sale now, but no one buys it. I drive by sometimes, and the windows seem to watch me, reflecting a life I never lived. What haunts me most isn't the mirrors, it's the secrets. The house knew things we never said out loud, things we hid even from ourselves. What if it's still there, waiting, whispering our truths to the next family? Story 5. The Shadow That Followed. I thought shadows were just tricks of light, until mine started moving on its own. My name's Emily, and in 2021, my family moved into a ranch-style house on Ashland Avenue in Fresno, California. It was me, my husband Tom, a delivery driver always on the road, and our 2 kids, Lily 10 and Ethan 7. The house was modest, with a sunny porch and a backyard perfect for the kids' games. I worked part-time at a bakery, coming home with flour in my hair, trying to keep up with family life. We moved here for a fresh start after a tough year, Tom's job cuts, my anxiety flaring, but the house felt heavy, like it was watching us from the moment we arrived. It started small, barely noticeable. I'd be in the kitchen, baking cookies for the kids, when my shadow on the wall would flicker, stretching longer than it should, even with the light steady. I'd blink and it would snap back normal again. I told myself it was exhaustion, my eyes playing tricks. But Lily noticed it too. "Mommy, why does your shadow look funny?" she asked one evening, her crayons pausing mid-draw. I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. Tom was gone most nights, driving cross-country, so it was just me and the kids. At night, the house creaked, not like old wood settling, but like something pacing, waiting. I checked the locks, peek in on Lily and Ethan, and try to sleep, but the air felt thick, charged with something unseen. One night, I was tucking Ethan into bed when he grabbed my hand, his eyes wide. "Mommy, your shadow's wrong," he whispered. I glanced at the wall. My shadow was there, but it was standing still, arms crossed, while I was bending over his bed. My heart thudded. I turned off the lamp, plunging us into darkness, and told him it was just the light. But the next day, I saw it again in the living room mirror, my shadow moving a split second slower than me, like it was mimicking me with a delay. I covered the mirror with a sheet, my hands trembling, and avoided looking at the walls. Lily started drawing shadows in her sketchbook, tall, thin figures with no faces, always behind a stick figure me. "It follows you," she said, her voice small. Ethan stopped playing outside, saying the backyard felt sad. I told Tom when he was home, but he was skeptical, exhausted from his routes. It's just shadows," he said, rubbing his eyes. "You're stressed, that's all." But he wasn't there when the lights flickered at night, when I heard whispers, my own voice but colder, saying, "You can't leave." I started keeping the kids close, locking us in my bedroom at night. One evening, I was washing dishes when I saw my shadow on the kitchen wall, moving without me. It turned, walked toward the hallway, and disappeared. I dropped a glass, the shatter echoing, and ran to check on the kids. They were fine watching TV, but Ethan said, "Mommy, you were just outside." My blood ran cold. I hadn't left the kitchen. I asked our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, about the house. She hesitated, then told me about a woman who lived here in the 90s. "She was like you," Mrs. Chen said, "a mom always alone with her kids. Had a breakdown, said her shadow was alive. Left one night, never came back. Nobody knows where she went." My heart sank. That night, I heard the whispers again, my voice coming from the basement. "Stay with me," it said. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands shaking, and went down. The basement was cold, empty except for old furniture, but my shadow on the wall was wrong. Taller, thinner, with eyes that glowed faintly. I ran upstairs, locked the basement door, and hugged the kids tight. The final straw came a week later. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find Lily gone. I searched the house, panic clawing at me, and found her in the backyard, staring at the ground. "She's lonely," Lily said, pointing at my shadow, which stretched across the grass, moving without me. I grabbed her, packed our bags, and we left at dawn, staying with my sister. We never went back. The house is empty now, the windows dark. I drive by sometimes, and my shadow in the car window looks wrong, like it's not mine anymore. What haunts me most isn't the shadow, it's Lily's last drawing left behind. It showed me, but my shadow had her face, smiling like it had claimed her. I keep her close now, but I can't stop checking the walls, wondering if it followed us.